Michigan chapter of Concerned Black Men, and I was invited here today to talk about Afrocentric photo learning. Afrocentric photo learning came out of my own experience working with black males. I'm a psychotherapist and a social worker, and I work with, I don't even like to use the term at risk because most of our people are at risk because we're oppressed. But it came out, my experience working with young black males who have issues as a result of the conditions that they face. Also, I currently teach at Ryan Correctional Facility. I teach a male responsibility class, and I have been there for the past 4 years, and I've taught in the Michigan Department of Corrections as a volunteer for over 18 years now. One of the things that I've learned, because I firmly believe that we have to learn from our people. And oftentimes we don't learn from our people. We tend to impose beliefs and value systems that have been imposed on us. And in my relationship, both with working with young black males in the school system, in private counseling, and adult males in the prison system, is that many of them suffer from reading comprehension to an extent. So that poses a challenge if you want to provide them with information so they can use that information to transform their behavior. So my experience has led me to believe that simply lecturing them, providing them information wasn't getting it. First of all, is because they had lower levels of reading comprehension. So what it made me start to do, really 20 years ago, I started to collect political cartoons. And I found through a process that those cartoons and those images and those graphics provoke black men to think about their conditions. And why? Because they could relate to them, they could see them. And so I realized the process of information for many black folks, especially our youth, is that they have to see something. In other words, a show and tell approach. Because just to give them information is very abstract. It can be very nebulous. There is no connection. But if you can give them pictures or graphics, scenes from the hood that they can relate to, they can then perceive that, and then from that perceptual process, they can develop more clear and concrete concepts about the conditions that they face. One of the problems in the school system is that I hear all the time is that so many young blacks in general, and young black males in particular, they're turned off by education. When I come in and say, man, this education is boring. I'm tired of it. I mean, I've wasted my time coming to school, and I do believe that many of you all who work with students hear those same comments. So if we're hearing those comments, it seems to me that we need to begin to modify or change our teaching methods with our children so it can become more relevant and engaging. Because I believe firmly that if information is not relevant, then our youth will not retain it. And information can only benefit people if they can retain the information to use it in a very practical way. So therefore what I see is that we need some real modifications of how we teach black youth, because we're actually literally driving them out. Most of us have been educated by Eurocentric pedagogy, which is very abstract and static. In other words, you sit down and you receive information. That is in total contradiction in the way youth process information today. Most youth of the hip-hop generation, they're socialized through television and the media. And therefore, the rap videos and those video games that they play, all the graphics are moving. So they develop sort of like a brain pattern of looking at moving graphics all the time. Then all of a sudden, they have to go to a school and simply sit down and read some information. So there's a conflict there. And oftentimes, teachers don't want to change because teachers have this attitude of adultism, which I put on the screen, which means all those behaviors and attitudes which flow from the assumption that adults are better than young people and entitled to act upon young people in myriad ways without their agreement. Do you all agree with that to an extent? And why do we have that adultism? Because we're adults, okay? Any other reason, just simply because you're an adult. Okay. Yeah. What I'm just saying is, yes.
I think that adults too are what it's like to be children.
Okay.
And we want them to be little adults. We want them to behave the way we want to, instead of remembering that children are free and they are absorbing, developing. And we don't address, you wouldn't want to be taught with SpongeBob as a 40-year-old, so why do we want to do things with a 5-year-old that's inappropriate for you at 5 years old? But because we're conditioned to think that this is the way we're supposed to teach them, and this is the attitude that we're supposed to have with them, then we forget that they're children.
I'm only going to take a couple more questions. I got a lot of information to cover. Yes, brother.
Well, often we think that way because it's what worked with us. And even though everything is the same, at the same time, everything is different. And we recognize how everything is the same, but sometimes we lose sight of how everything is different. So we're doing the same strategies that worked in 1990, but may not be relevant for 2005.
I'd like to interject this quickly. As black people as a whole, we've always suffered from white paternalism all of our lives. Is there a connection between sort of white paternalism and black adultism? Because that's the same attitude George Bush has. I'm the white godfather, whatever I say is correct.
How do you do that in the classroom? I understand exactly what you're saying, to teach to start where they are. But if they're going to be successful in the world that we're trying to prepare them for, the world is not going to change for them.
Well, I will move on, but the reality of it is, I think we got to create our own world. Because the world is not working for those of us who have education, because we're powerless. And the fact that our children see the fact that we're powerless, we're not involved in empowering them. So when they look at us, we're a bunch of hypocrites, really. There are a lot of other factors why our young people don't really look to us. And to be honest, I don't blame them. Because let's face it, when we look at today's youth culture, in many ways it's no different than the 60s youth culture. The 60s youth culture challenged a black Southern mentality, period, which was a correct thing to do. And you saw that in the contradiction even between Martin Luther King's approach and Malcolm X's approach. And when Martin Luther King tried to bring the civil rights movement to the North, it was ineffective. Because the issue in the North, which is still is today, is the issue around power. And I'm saying is when our young people hear us talk, they don't see no power. They see black people with PhDs in their communities, with PhD from U of M, with a PhD in economics, yet Arabs control everything in the community. You know, they control everything. So when our young people look at us, they're looking at what we say, but they're looking at the world around them. And oftentimes we don't take that more broader perspective because as adults, is that we're very insecure. And sometimes when young people challenge us, it brings out our insecurities. I think that's one of the things, one of the major issues that black males have. And the reason why we're not in homes, because we feel so insecure, because we don't have power. We see that whether it's Arab, Korean, or East Indian men, they dominate our internal communities. And in the suburbs, white males dominate everything. So black men start to feel that they're sort of like useless and powerless. So I'm just saying is the issues that our young people have with us are, in many instances, legitimate issues. As the sister brought out, it's a contradiction between the young and the old, struggling for clarity, struggling for correctness. Also, I want to mention regarding young black males, I just looked at some recent data, and only 40% of young black males are graduating from high school. And really nothing is being done to really address that issue. and again with young black males, because I have to deal with them, and I've been in classroom context with them, is that they might be in a social studies class and the teacher might be talking about George Washington. So a young brother's in the back and he's looking at his history textbook, but in between the pages he has a Source magazine. So what is he saying to that history teacher? How relevant is George Washington in his day-to-day life? And realistically, how relevant is it? As educators, how relevant is George Washington to a young brother growing up on Tuxedo and Linwood or Gratiot? He looks at that's irrelevant. And if he has any degree of understanding, he said, well, you know, George Washington was a slave owner. Why am I really listening to him? So on one level, in the classroom context, you have those various dynamics going on with young black males, that we don't bring their culture and reality to the classroom. For example, I have a friend that's an English teacher, and we had a discussion on bringing information about Tupac in the classroom. And I asked her, I said, why is it that young black people can learn Shakespeare and it's mandatory, but they can't read the poetry of Tupac Shakur? But yet you have white students at the University of California, Berkeley, getting PhDs in literature with a concentration on Tupac. But why is it they can be exposed to Tupac on a university level, but black teachers, I'm talking about black teachers, have a problem with integrating Tupac Shakur into a literature class? Why is that? I'm throwing that out for the teachers here.
I want them to be able to deal with any situation when they come when they go outside those doors. And we can deal with Tupac Shakur, but I want them to also be literate in Shakespeare.
But we've been knowing about Shakespeare all of our lives. I mean, that dominates everything. I mean, but what I'm saying is, to a degree,
We don't do it because we're closed-minded a lot of times. We don't like to think outside the box. I work special ed. I think outside the box. I have to do it a different way because I'm a special ed instructor. But regular ed teachers, they get comfortable with they like to be told what to do. They like the curriculum to be there. They have I don't think that there's enough innovativeness in a classroom for these young men, because special ed deals with 97% boys. Most of my caseload is boys. And I deal with boys from a boy perspective. Boy perspective is very different from the way we teach. Boy perspective needs manipulation. Boy perspective needs to get up. Boy perspective needs to be able to touch it and move it and take it apart and put it back together. And that requires a different classroom setting than sitting in a seat with a desk and rows. So as long as we continue to sit in a seat and desk with rows, and we want them to sit down, and we want them to do paper pencil tasks instead of them teaching them how to use some blocks to see how subsets are divided, so that you can understand how 45 is, because you got 4 yellow blocks, which are 10, and 4 red blocks, which are the ones, and then I can take it apart and I can put it back together, and I can take that yellow block and make it red and make 10 of those little red ones because those are the ones placed. I can understand that as a boy.
well, you know what,
I can't understand what the boys are not understanding what we're teaching them, because we don't teach them along the ways that they understand.
I know young guys who add dope money but have a problem with basic math, because money is real practical and they can count it. But when they read a math book, it's real abstract. They lose it because it's not hands-on.
Piece of paper, they can't touch it, they can't feel it.
Okay.
They can't relate to it.
This sister you had your hand up?
Know about Tupac Shakur. All they know is the negative of rap. They never see the writings, you know what I'm saying? You would have to take it upon yourself to investigate yourself.
You know what is real interesting about our people? To me, education should be child-centered. Oftentimes with us, it's adult-centered. And I'm going to bring this, I'm going to get to you in just one second, brother. For instance, a lot of, especially black women, go to church. Okay, church is a part of our history, okay? But there's much more to our history just in church. A young brother might be turned off by gospel music, or his mama going to church all the time, giving the preacher some money. You know, but he deals with that, but then his mama would totally reject his culture. Why? Why is a gospel culture more important than a secular culture? See? Again, it's adultism. These are my beliefs, and I want to impose them on the classroom. And the young brother said his position to him is just as valid. This brother here.
I just the question would be why don't you teach?
Yeah, or just integrate hip hop culture.
My point is that at my high school, I can't speak for any others. The test, drives the curriculum, and in my discipline, there's a pacing chart, and the pacing chart is congruent with what they say is going to be on the test, even though it isn't. But the point is that they are holding me to a standard when I'm of the mind that that there are other ways to get them through the material, but the tests are measuring these abilities, and that's what drives our curriculum, and that's what moves out Tupac and other things at my high school.
I have to move on. Janice Hale, she has a book, Learning While Black, which I would recommend anybody to buy. It's very. She states, African American children are exposed to a high degree of stimulation from the creative arts. They are surrounded by stimuli from the visual arts, such as posters, paintings, and graffiti. The audio arts in the form of phonograph, radio, and tape recording. The video arts, such as television and films, and the fashion arts in forms such as creative hairstyles, hat scarves, and a general orientation toward adornment of the body. An orientation that grows out of the African heritage. So our children are actually stimulated by us. I mean, go to a black Pentecostal church. I mean, it's real stimulating, am I right? People running around, falling out. That's extremely stimulating. So what happens is we bring up our children with this stimulation. Then when they exhibit this stimulation in the classroom, then they're punished. Do you all agree with her quote? Did you bring your children, how many of you all brought up your children maybe listening to the sounds of the 60s or whatever the case may be? You know, we stimulate our kids. So why are they then punished when they come out of an environment of stimulation? And have we not recognized that cultures are different? See, one of the problems that I have is this universalism. You know, human beings in a generic sense might be human, but we all come out of a particular environment. Some of you all might witness Muslims all over the world in outrage over the Danish paper depicting a derogatory image of Prophet Muhammad. And people here might be, why are they doing that? It's a different culture. It's a different cultural sensitivity. Maybe they respect their religion maybe much more than we do. Maybe somebody could denigrate black folks and we may not say nothing, am I right? So the reality of it is, whether you go to Afghanistan, China, wherever you go in this world, people have unique and particular experiences. And why are we denying, especially through our youth, our own unique experiences? And I'm saying, even in my home, whether the way you ate dinner, the way you moved around the house, it was not static. Even if you look at jazz, improvisation, our whole culture is one of movement. And when our young people want to move, we condemn them. Even, I'll give an example, we talk about graphic. Many young black males are very visual. It's reflected in clothes. We're very visual now, whether it's my suit, whether some of the outfits sisters got on, it's very visual. We relate to that. You know, it's like young people might wear long t-shirts. They're visual. Then all of a sudden we got to make them uniform, give them a uniform. Give them a uniform. Because I look at it this way, when I was growing up as a child in the 60s, brothers wore dashikis that were down to the knee. What's the difference between a long t-shirt down to the knee and a dashiki, really?
Can I make a comment
Yeah.
real quick?
Yeah.
Because I was I had it in my presentation yesterday, that the kids should be able to design, if you're gonna make them uniforms, let them design their own. They have the creativity, let them design their own. But when you say about the long t-shirts,
Yeah.
the only problem I have with that is the song that's associated with the tall tees.
Yeah.
Now that song. you
the
know
song.
Me and my tall white tee, give me my tall tee.
Yeah.
Give me my tall tee, hold my
Yeah.
tall tee, holds like my tall tee. Now I'm gonna tell you because I'm in middle school.
Okay.
And they have the like you said, the long tees. It's the song that's associated with that. You got to listen to it.
Yeah, but I'm saying I don't. But see, I think A long T and a song about the T is two different issues.
Okay, well, but it's not for the kids though. It's not.
Huh?
Now you talking about relating with the kids, because I'm a middle
Yeah.
school person, and middle school is where everything is at. It's you know, it's between high school and elementary. Middle school, I know how it is when you're presenting and you want to get all your material.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
I'm not going to ask any more questions, but I'm going to tell you the relationship, and if you haven't heard the song,
Yeah.
you need to hear the song with the tall T's, because that is totally out of
The reason why I say,
except for a Grammy, and they turned it
Yeah.
down because of the word.
I used to stay in Long Beach back in the early 80s, and brothers out there was wearing long tees back then. The advent of hip.
Their pants down and hiding weapons in there.
Well, the reality of it is, again, that's a different issue, because I could be a white man with a suit with a weapon. So,
I heard why we can't let them.
I understand that, but I'm just saying is it's still, again, irregardless of all the reasons, all I'm saying the degree, there's these cultural wars. For example, back in the 40s, black men wore zoot suits. Okay. Out of that, you had zoot suit riots. You had Franklin Delano Roosevelt put in a law against wearing longer suits. And black men still wore them. Because it's cultural wars. This is what I call dress guerrilla warfare. And the fact of it is, young people going to always create certain things, period. Whatever reasons adults give them, they still going to create something. I want to talk about the dominant learning style of black children. Black children are very visual. As I mentioned, it's reflected in their clothing. It's reflected in how they've socialized information through video and television. Young blacks are very concrete in their perceptions. They look at the real world. See, one of the problems about the United States poses all of this idealism. All men are created equal. All that stuff sounds great, doesn't it? I mean, it does in an ideal, in the ultimate sense, but is that for real? It's not for real. What happens is with adults is that we begin to somehow cling on to these ideas. For example, I was talking to an older black man in a church a few weeks ago, and he kept making reference to when he was working at Ford's, and young brothers don't want to. Well, I said, wait a minute, man, has the world not changed? Didn't you just read that Ford just laid off 30,000 people? So he's harking back on Ford and back in the day, these ideals, but the reality, there is no Ford jobs. I live in Pontiac, Michigan. Pontiac, a small city of 65,000, has lost 30,000 GM jobs. Who has it affected? Primarily young black males and females. You go out of North Saginaw, 65,000 GM jobs. Go to Flint, 115,000 GM jobs. 115,000. So you have to remember, black folks only came up here primarily to work, am I right? For industry. We didn't come here to vote, no nothing. We came here to work. That's why you got a Royal Oak Township, Inkster, Detroit, the I-75 corridor, Pontiac, Flint, Saginaw, where the bulk of blacks live in this state, came up here to work for Ford, GM, and Chrysler. That is gone now because of a global economy. And see, what adults are clinging on to those days, that is not the reality. If I'm a young person looking out, when I perceive the concrete world, I don't see that, do I? I don't see that. In the concrete world of a black child, what do they see on their way to school? They see abandoned buildings, run-down houses. They see poverty. They see suffering. They see misery. That's what they see. And see, what happens is that that's their reality. And oftentimes we don't want to look at that because as black adults, we have failed. We have failed. I mean, what I'm saying by this, we have a historical mandate, from my perspective, to move things forward. Even Martin Luther King in 1968 said, where do we go from here? He said that we had to have a different civil rights struggle. And what I'm saying is today, young people who have grown up in the post-civil rights era, they don't see the benefits that we got. They don't see that. So their whole world, they look at the world from a concrete perspective, and oftentimes we look at it from an idealistic perspective.
If you show us how we can fail, tell me how I can succeed. Let me show you.
We can't discuss all that right now just during this hour, sister.
Learning, and you're going to show me how to use it for the learning?
Yeah, we're going to get to that point. common sense orientated. We have to build on the fact that our students do have, and our young people do have common sense. They do have some common sense about this world. They're not all as dumb as we make them out to be. I gave an example as a young brother can count money, but at the same time that he may have problems with math. But in a common sense way, he knows money well enough that you won't cheat him out of money. They're very kinesthetic. They're very active, as the sister mentioned. You know, young brothers might spontaneously like get up for a second. And what happens is if you have been reared by this controlled environment, that may startle you, it may frighten you, or you may look at that as being out of control. But the fact of it is these young brothers are just simply very active. So maybe when they stand up, we need to stand up. Maybe if they go to the back of the room, maybe we need to go to the back of the room with them. They're very tactile, they're hands-on, they're very expressive. And to a degree, they're emotional and they're spontaneous. And they're oppositional. The hip-hop culture is oppositional, no different than the oppositional culture of the 60s. Because you got to remember, it was the opposition or the conflict between nonviolence and people like the Black Panthers talking about violence, am I right? The young people were mainly talking more about violence. The older people said, no, you can't do it that way. We're going to get annihilated. You can't defend yourself. And all we need to do is elect a good white president and everything's going to be solved.
Can I add that out of those dominant learning styles that you have up there,
Mm-hmm.
only maybe 3 of them are the ones that we use in the classroom.
Give me an example.
The learning styles that we use in the classroom are basically an auditory learning style.
Okay.
And a visual learning style is based on maybe the kinetics, the tactile, and maybe your visual graphics. So and I say that because I just studied that lesson. But so what we're looking at is, and when we start talking about like No Child Left Behind, because I am in grad school and I read all this stuff, we start talking about No Child Left Behind and the learning, the things that they want you to learn, none of that is on that list. So what we're talking about is the dominant culture is putting in place an educational process that doesn't touch the way our children learn.
I want to talk about some effective teaching recommendations. These are from basically my own experiences, working with, as I mentioned earlier during my introduction, not only working with young black males, providing prevention and intervention services, but my experience working with black males in the correctional facility, which is a real challenge because if you don't change, if you're not engaging and relevant, they will let you know that for real. First thing is non-authoritarian to a degree. I think with young people today, there has to be some degree of negotiation. I mean, there are times when you have to exercise authority, but you can't have that authoritarian outlook, my way or the highway. And I think, part of education is it has to be some agreement. And we talked about adultism earlier, and oftentimes adultism negates any type of negotiation. And so if you take a authoritarian posture with a culture that's based on opposition anyway, you got some real problems. Because see, what these young people would do is they'll tell you in a minute, okay, this is the way you want to be, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. Or if you're going to be that authoritarian, I'm going to disrupt you. I'm going to cause you some problems. I'm going to cause you some real problems. And I might even take it out in the streets with you. You might can beat me in the classroom, but I bet you can't beat me in the neighborhood. And you got to get out this neighborhood. Yeah, I mean, that's the reality of teaching in the hood, for real. It has to be, as I mentioned, it has to be child-centered. We got to focus on these children. And sometimes we have to do away with all of our beliefs. I find sometimes, because I've been in schools where some teachers try to impose religion. I mean, that religion is fine for you. That's good for you. But don't impose that on these kids. If you feel it's okay, but, that's another issue. But what I'm saying is the education should be about these children. building on the strengths that they have. We have to be culturally competent. Culture is very dynamic. It's holistic. There is a youth culture. There's a secular culture. There's a religious culture. There is a African-centered culture within our experience. We have these different experiences within our culture. And we need to become competent, whether Christian, Muslim. We need to spend time learning about these young people, whether it's the language or whether words that they use, like the word, they might say G. Most people think that means gangster, which it does on the West Coast. But if you go to New York, which is heavily influenced by the 5%ers, G means God. So what I'm saying is, as we read a lot of stuff and watch television and so absorbed in everybody else's culture, we need to become more competent in our own culture and the best of our culture. And to understand, there's some very positive things about hip-hop culture too, because corporate America uses hip-hop. They exploit it to their own benefit. And we also have to understand the richest young black males in America, where did they come out of? The hip-hop culture. How many of them have MBAs and all that? They don't have that. I mean, these cats are dwarfing the money that Berry Gordy could ever think of. Through what? Hip-hop. Speaking what? Ebonics, am I right? So you can't tell these young brothers that that ain't about nothing. You can't. Because they're like, you don't even know what you're talking about. We have to be dynamic. Because we've already stated that our children are kinesthetic. They're very lively. So if you come into a classroom and just simply sit down just like this in a low monotone class, we need to do that. That's not moving them, you know? And as the sister mentioned, I agree with a lot of teachers come to school with their own issues. Their health is not in order. So if your health ain't in order, what you going to do? If you're tired, you're going to sit down. That's what you're going to do. But the kids are looking at you, and as you're tired, they're tired of you. Because they're young people. They need to be stimulated. As the sister mentioned, they're 8, 9, 10 years old. Maybe you might have problems with diabetes, but they don't. You know what I'm saying? And you need to maybe tell them that, you know what I'm saying? Or you might need to have one of them kids to help you in the classroom, or whatever the case may be. But you can't expect these children, you know, to simply be there very bored with something that's totally non-stimulated when they're socialized around a lot of stimulation. You got to be relevant to these young people. You know, you got to take issues, even when they come to school with a lot of hood drama. Sometimes there's teaching information in that. You could take that hood drama, whether you're talking about Willie got murdered down the street. That's an excellent time to talk about black-on-black violence, or whatever the case may be, or some other issues. And often as we hear that, and the first thing we want to do is throw them out the classroom. But that's relevant to them, because maybe Willie was their cousin. See, because one thing, I live in Pawnee. I live a 5-minute walk from Bloomfield Hills. And I'm going to tell you, I remember a couple years ago, 4 white boys died in a car accident. They shut the whole school system down. They brought in the Red Cross. When black kids come to school, ain't nobody bringing the Red Cross. They ain't shutting the schools down. Ain't nobody providing post-traumatic stress counseling. Come on. See what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is at times this stuff is meaningful to our young people. It is. I mean, let's face it, a young Jeezy probably is more important than Martin Luther King to these young people. You know what I've done just recently, I talked about Martin Luther King to a group of gangster young brothers, I'm talking about out cold. And what I said to them, I said, you know what, Martin Luther King went to jail 125 times. They said, what? What? I said 125 times. For freedom, no. I said, how many young brothers today would do that for freedom? How many young brothers got that much balls to stand in front of white supremacy and the Ku Klux Klan? So they all got real quiet. Because Martin Luther King wasn't no punk. He downer than y'all is, you know? So what I'm saying is you got to come with them with those experiences and confront them, but you got to be creative. We have to be empathetic, but we got to expect responsibility. Because I'm going to tell you something, man. These young kids got it rough out here. Because, see, I did a lot of in-home therapy, and I done seen it all. And it ain't nothing nice. A lot of these kids, like Tupac said, they mamas are trying to make $1 out of 15 cents, and they always 85 cents short. So you got to understand, see, one of the things is that we got to understand our children have been left behind. Damn what Bush talking about. Black people been left behind. I mean, in Detroit, half the black children are growing up in poverty, man. Imagine how to deal with poverty every day. trying to get through poverty. I've been in certain middle schools with young sisters coming to class. Half the side of their hair is combed, the other side ain't combed. One sock on, one sock off. Their parents might be crackheads, but they try to do the best that they can to dress themselves and come to school. And we got to feel that. That's why these young people say, you ain't feeling me. See, you ain't feeling me. And see, Kunjufu told us about the conflict in the classroom between middle-class teachers and really poor black students. See, that's real. It's a class conflict here because you live in Southfield Lathrop. So your kids ain't got to worry when you making $85,000 a year in the Detroit public school and they mama only making $6,000. It's a big difference, and you got to feel that. And oftentimes we don't. I'm here because a lot of times we take the whole attitude, we're no different than white folks, for real. And I'm not just generically saying all white folks are like that, but let's face it, the majority of whites in America are racist, and we can prove that just in residential housing and other factors. But I'm saying is, in the black community, we got this class perspective that is just as detrimental as a racist perspective, and we got to come to grips with that. But we got to be empathetic to our children, but at the same time, we got to make them responsible too, period. Because they got to have some kind of accountability, because if they don't get it from us, the police going to make them accountable. The prison system going to make them accountable in the worst way. We got to allow children to have breaks and movements. I mean, let a kid get up for a minute or so, stretch, and do his thing for a minute. They kids. A lot of black schools don't even have gyms and stuff. So where do kids get any kind of exercise? How do they release their tensions? They supposed to just sit there all day, just like this, from class to class? That's why they go nuts in the hallway sometimes. They like, man. Give short-term, assignments. Give them, little short-term assignments that they can complete. Maybe not take the whole period. Give them something they can do for 15 minutes. Maybe give them a couple 10-minute ones. Provide small group activities where they lead. Let them lead sometime. Integrate drama, music, and art. Use graphics and objects. Use pictures. I mean, you got to be selective. There are some decent videos out here that you can bring into the classroom. I mean, some good ones that these kids can relate to and they can get some information out of. Okay. Yeah. But again, I think sometimes, I have to really say this, we can't be rude. I've heard some rudeness here, to be honest, and I'm not going to go there. I think in any presentation that you can't come to a presentation and somebody going to move from A to Z. Because you know what? Nobody out here, ain't no leader on this planet, nobody, including your preacher, you're going to come into to the church, and within an hour, he going to move you from A to Z, give you the solution, you're going to leave, amen, Shangri-La, panacea, we in heaven. I think we got to understand there's a process. There's a process. And I'm saying is we got to work through a process. This is not bashing on anybody. This is simply talking about some of the issues that we face. You know, and we can talk about this, my business card here. You can come to my office and even dialogue further. But I'm saying there is a process, and I talked about that very early on. Now getting to Afrocentric phototherapy. How many of you all are social studies teachers in here? Okay. Now, if you look at this picture, for instance, now why would this graphic be relevant or related to black youth experiences? What does it look like? Okay. Looks like Monopoly, because that's the bottom line. As soon as I show this to kids, that's the first thing that they say. Tell me, sister, tell me a little bit about Monopoly, about the game. Me either. That's why I had to ask somebody. It's been so long. Okay. Yeah. And you might land on a square that might send you all the way back. Am I right? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So my point, though, is immediately young people find that photo relevant. Am I right? Because they play. I mean, like immediately when I show this. Now, so you got a hook. Okay. Also, unlike the pieces on the Monopoly, if I can reflect back, I think they're like colored red, blue, white, and yellow. Okay. I mean, they're kind of ambiguous. This piece is more clear. Am I right? We talked about young people being concrete perceivers. Am I right? So this is very concrete and specific. Am I right? It's a specific example of a piece who's actually a black male. Am I right? Okay. Now, obviously, if you look at the game, and these kids can relate to, he's back to square one. Am I right? And kids understand that because they play the game. See, at this point, you can then explain to them why we come back to square one as a social studies teacher. And I'm telling, this can capsulize everything that you're trying to teach for weeks. It capsulizes all of that. And they can then perceive it, then through talking about it, and explaining the Civil War and emancipation and affirmative action, then they can begin to conceptualize it, see? It's not ambiguous anymore. It's not abstract. It's not this boring stuff in the text. Just like in rap, if you know anything about rap, is a hook line. You know, that's the hook you in, so you can, you know, the young people hit the beat, that's the hook. We got to use hooks, am I right? We got to hook these young people in. And I'm saying is I've used cartoons, and I've yet, to be honest, to have an experience where the young people weren't hooked. Because, again, they can see this. See, that's just one example of using something in a social studies class. And not only that, this is relevant, am I right? Because it's going on right now. This ain't, although the historical precedents are here, but this is reality. This is 2006. This is as we speak, I think, sometime this year, they're going to vote on affirmative action in this state, am I right? And there's a high possibility that white folks are going to vote against it in other states where they've had, because white people perceive we done went too far. See, you done gone far enough. And if we're in a position to stop it, that's what we're going to do. So what I'm saying is it's concrete and it's relevant, see, and it's engaging to them. You can even have them make their own games. All I'm saying is this is just one example. Now, how does that deal with using pictures to deal with critical thinking? One of the biggest problems that I see across the board in the black community is that we don't engage in critical thinking. We simply don't. Now, you can take the picture that I just showed. Matter of fact, I don't have enough pictures with me. You can pass these around and you can share. And everybody can kind of look at these. I don't have enough for everybody. So maybe a group of 3 or 4 can look on. Now, when we look at critical thinking, if you decide to use pictures or cartoons that are both engaging and relevant, you can then ask a series of critical thinking questions. The first question deals with accuracy. Does this picture reflect a reality? Is it more factual or opinionated? You all have a picture right in front of you. Let's go through this quickly as like a classroom assignment. Is that picture pretty accurate? Yeah, yeah.
Could be.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be funny.
Yeah.
I just want to know who is making the money, because somebody has to be making the money off of our young brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
As well. Who's making the money?
But if you look at the cartoon, it shows you. Look in the box at the bottom cartoon. Yeah. But I'm just saying is there are 70 prisons in Michigan. Who you think built those 70 prisons? Probably the same group of white guys. Yeah. Okay, now, first thing in critical thinking, when you teach young people about anything, is the picture or statement accurate? Is it based on fact or opinions? Okay. Next thing, precision. What specific issue does the picture address? What specific issue? If you look at the bottom picture, what is that really trying? That slavery continues today in a new form, am I right? Okay. That's precision. Next thing, how does this picture relate to the issue? Is it relevant? Okay, next is, what are the deeper perspectives that the picture shows? You're talking about depth. What are the other issues when you see this cartoon that may come to mind? It's the same kind of slavery? Yeah. Well, give for an example, very briefly.
For example, this one was, the top picture, that was put upon, but is this type of slavery actually put upon? There's a lot of discussion about that.
I give an example. The bottom line here. See, what you have to understand is social engineering and social conditions. Now, for example, in 1980, as I mentioned earlier, you had all these huge plant layoffs, okay, which had a drastic impact on black males, okay. Now, in the early 80s, what drug hit the scene out of nowhere? Crack. Okay, if you look at prison data, the majority of young black males are great, especially in the federal system, are in because of crack cocaine. Then they had the differences between a crack cocaine law and a cocaine law. And in Michigan, in the early 80s, you had 30 prisons. Today, you have about 70. All these prisons, except for 2, are located in all white communities. There are 26 prisons in the Upper Peninsula. If you pull a prison out, the economy collapses. So it is imposed. It's the same thing. White men are making decisions to bring dope in your community, denying you jobs and everything. I give an example. The white men that's bringing dope, they ain't going to prison. They're not being incarcerated for their policies, are they? I'm not saying, I ain't talking about, see, sister, it boils down this way about choices. No, I'm not saying that. You got to look at the larger impact, though. What I'm saying is if you live in a community where there's 80% unemployment, 80%, you don't have no money, you don't have nothing, you don't have black people with no businesses, no nothing. All the white businesses are gone overseas, Mexico, Thailand, Vietnam, and you just stuck here. And the only resource that you have available is that. And you didn't bring the resources, somebody else did. So we're talking about survival purposes. I'm saying the setup factor of it. That's all I'm saying.
I'll tell you this, I came home from working at the post office, found my husband on the floor in the basement, overdose of drugs. So now I chose to go to school, to work hard, to get my degree, working midnights at the post office. He chose to do that.
But I'm saying,
So now, come on now.
but away from that, see, no. Just wait. Well, we will. I'm saying yours is personal. Your husband is older. I'm talking about younger guys. Yeah, but that's more personal, sister. I'm talking about these younger guys.
But it's the same thing. They have choices. We have to teach our children to make positive choices.
But you got to give people opportunities, am I right?
The opportunities are there.
Oh.
They've got to make choices to pursue those opportunities.
Okay. Well,
I'm just going to try to tell you.
And I'm absolutely against using drugs and things like that.
I said primarily selling. I didn't say black men were in prison in these mass numbers through you. It's through selling. I didn't say using.
But I'll be honest. I have 2 children in college, and I'm telling you, it's changed. Where I went to school, getting financial aid, oh, it's changed now. It's changed. And you
We got a couple minutes, sister.
really don't even have that opportunity.
Sister in the blue, you had a comment.
And that's a real thing. That's a real thing.
But the thing that's important for them to understand is how those choices will, in many cases, put them into the system that you're talking about on this cartoon. And that by being part of that system, we're feeding into the white economic system. And what I'm saying is, when you get into this drug stuff, you're promoting and helping them build more prisons, you're supporting the lawyers and the judges and everything else. So you're a victim of all this crap that's going on because of the choices that you make.
But also, you have to remember, I'm going to get to you in 1 second, brother, is that, remember, when you start talking about crime, it's a social reality, am I right? Let's face it. Many of you all benefited from the civil rights movement and didn't participate a day, am I right? Not a day. Not a day. I said, I didn't say all, wait, but it's getting back to my point. Now, I said many, I didn't say all. Okay. Now, my point is, the civil rights movement created opportunities, am I right, that did not exist before, am I right? So, all the choices you could have made, if the opportunities wasn't there, like in the South, it didn't make a difference, did it? That's why folks had to confront it and die as a result of it. All I'm saying today, and this is just real, I just saw some recent statistics. In 1860, 98% of all black folks worked for whites. That statistic hasn't changed. So my point of it is, within the black community, you got to remember, when you look at 21-year-old, 15-year-old young adults, what have the adults been doing all these years to create opportunities when the white system cuts us loose? What did the adults have as an alternative for these kids? Okay, brother, your point.
My point is that I don't think it's really so much well, let me just say that, not what it is. What we need is more adult supervision, but we do need to respect the young people. What we want them to do is be able to, as a wise man once told me, I had to think for myself, because what worked for him in his day ain't gonna work for me in my day. And that what was true then when he told me that, is still true now. We have to teach our children to think for themselves and respect the intelligence that they have. At the same time, we must impart values. There's a lot of negativity that comes to them because they're not getting their values from us. They get, we talked about sexual stuff, etc., but we didn't have it put quite the way these youngsters. They're not the ones making the decision to put the negativity
But one of
out
the things I
there.
want to talk about,
It's
just
written-
real briefly, trying to escape this economic issue. The reality of it is that as adults, black folks, 95% of all our wealth go to non-blacks. All I'm saying, with the brightest, the most smartest amongst us, are we still saying that only white folks should employ us? But what happens when they have a global economy where foreign GM is going to China when there are no jobs anymore? So whose responsibility is it to create something for these young people? Isn't it us? Okay.
I currently work for early intervention, and I go into the neighborhoods to do my job. And I actually go into neighborhoods where they are selling. And, you know, I'm there every week while they're selling. And one of the things that I used to wonder was why all these young black men are always hanging out on the street and none are going to work. Well, now I have a young black man that's 22 years old, and I have understood what it's like for them not to be employable. It doesn't matter if you have a high school diploma. It doesn't matter if you have 2 years in college. Some black men are frightening to the person in control of employment. My son is 6'2". He's about that gentleman's color over there, and he is almost unemployable with 2.5 years of college. So now when I go out on the street and I'm driving through the city and I see young black men on the street, I relate to their inability to be employable. They may not have a high school diploma. They may not be able to read. They are even more
Maybe the economy is
unemployed.
very bad. Maybe there's a recession, and maybe the fact that jobs are not even here anymore.
And
Maybe they're not
we
even
can barely get a job, so
Yeah.
maybe we should understand why they're out there trying to figure out how to make a dime.
Let's thinking. What points of view can be drawn from this picture? Breadth. You've heard the breadth of comments. It's various different comments, which is a good thing. What central idea does the picture convey? The bottom line of it is that in many instances, the new slavery is similar to the old slavery, where we were enslaved and the plantation owner, which was a city, made money. Now white cities today are benefiting. While black men are locked down, white men are going to work every day, pick up trucks, homes are sending their kids to college. Now, these are other important questions that can be raised from a kind of personal standpoint. What have I learned from the picture? That's a personal thing. You ask the student, what have I learned about this picture? Okay. Next question. What about the picture that affected me most? Again, that's more personal. What feelings did the picture provoke? Next is, how do we change or improve the picture? Not just the young people, what about us too? Finally, what are our plans to improve the picture? Because oftentimes as black folks, we talk about improvement, but it's not no plan behind it, see? It's just a bunch of talk, see? It ain't no money coming. So young people say, whatever, got to do what I got to do. Okay. And really that's kind of the gist of photo learning in a real capsulized way that deals with, from my perspective, the learning styles of our children using pictures that they can relate to increase their conceptual understanding. And first and foremost is to really creating them to be critical thinkers. Not only criticizing themselves, but be able to critically analyze us too. And not only that, analyze the larger society and to step up and to be leaders. You know what I'm saying? And, yes. No, I don't have it in a handout because I gave so much stuff out. You know, you can only give out so much. No. I mean, you got my contact information. Right here is a brochure there. You can pick up the brochure. There is a book that I use, the whole same concept with Gas in Prison if you want to purchase. And I get, it's $10. Well, no, I mean, look how thick this is. Though the bottom questions are. Any other questions or comments?
I think you were excellent.
Yeah. What I try to do is simply, because remember, I'm outside the box. I'm not an educator. I deal with black males, and I have to deal with black males on the basis of what they bring to me and what I've also learned as a black man out here. Because again, if we're going to try to educate our people, is that we got to understand our people. We're going to educate them. And we need to deal with these issues because these issues are good, because we need to debate some of these issues. We need to discuss issues because we're impacted by many issues and we remain very silent on. And what is happening is we're blaming our young people. But let's face it, I'm in with this. I tell you what, the Detroit public school system ain't in crisis because of young people. It ain't in no huge deficit because of young people. Ford and GM, when they leave the country, it ain't because of young black folks. See, we got to be sometimes real clear of who we raise issues to, because sometimes it's easier to attack youth because it's easier and it's, sometimes we're more fearful to attack other folks to a degree. I'd like to thank you all for coming out, and I think we got about 5 minutes.